You're old. Sit in the back, she said. Loud enough for the waitress to freeze, quiet enough to make it seem like a joke. I wasn't laughing. Cassie didn't even look at me when she said it. She just kept tapping at her phone, her perfectly manicured finger hovering like a little dagger. Her friend giggled. A boy across the table, I think his name was Brandon, looked awkwardly into his drink. And I, Agnes Hart, 73 years old, stood there holding my purse and a gift bag, waiting to be acknowledged at my own granddaughter's birthday dinner. It wasn't even my idea to come. Cassie's mother, my daughter, had called last week. Mom, Cassie really wants you there. She picked out a restaurant. It's that fusion place by the lake. She wants to celebrate as a family this year. As a family. I had spent the day baking cookies to bring. The oatmeal kind Cassie used to love when she was a little girl. I wrapped her gift in silver paper, tucked a card inside with a check large enough to cover part of her tuition. I even wore my navy dress, the one I'd kept for special dinners. But none of it mattered. Because the moment I walked in, Cassie saw me as a problem to be placed out of sight. Sit in the back, behind the friends, behind the noise, behind the life. I didn't move right away. The waitress stood there holding 2 menus, her eyes flicking between us. My daughter, Diane, waved from the end of the long table, as if that would soften the blow. Mom, it's just a bit crowded, she said too cheerfully. Cassie thought you'd be more comfortable in the corner, where it's quieter. I'm old, not deaf. I heard it all. I sat in the back. They talked, laughed, clinked glasses. I sat alone at a small table meant for afterthoughts and early reservations. No one refilled my water. No one asked about my week. Cassie opened my gift without reading the card. I watched her hand the envelope to her mother, whisper something. Diane smiled tightly. The check disappeared into her purse. I heard no thank you. The food came. I picked at mine. The waitress asked if I needed anything. I asked for the bill. You're not splitting it with them? She asked, surprised. I looked at the long table, the drinks, the appetizers, the extra desserts they hadn't touched. And then I looked at my plate. No, I said. Put the whole thing on my card. I paid over $600 that night for people who didn't want me there. When I stood up to leave, no one noticed. I paused near their table. Cassie was taking selfies. Diane was laughing a little too loudly, trying to impress someone. Nobody looked my way. I walked out into the November cold with only my coat and my dignity. In the parking lot, I stood beside my old Saturn, keys in hand. Something inside me, something brittle and sharp, started to move. I looked at the receipt, still warm from the register. I saw the name on the payment account. Mine. I saw the list of items. Theirs. I saw a pattern, one I'd ignored for far too long. Years of paying, of giving, of being quiet. Tuition help, grocery cards, car repairs, birthday checks, rent emergencies. And now, a birthday dinner where I was told to sit in the back. I got into the car and sat still for a long while, the engine running. The heat blew against my legs. I opened the glove box and found an envelope, the copy of the bank's fraud alert brochure they'd given me months ago, after someone tried to open a card in my name. I never thought I'd need it. But now, the memory of that envelope burned in my hand. At home, I took off my coat and placed it neatly on the chair. I put the kettle on. I turned on the lamp in the corner, the one with the dusty shade and the chipped base. The house was quiet. Too quiet for someone who'd raised a daughter and helped raise a granddaughter. Too quiet for someone who'd paid so much and received so little. I sat down at the table, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. I clicked on Transaction History. Then I opened a new tab, searched for Report Suspected Fraud, and began typing. When you sit alone in a house that's too quiet, you hear everything. The hum of the fridge, the whisper of the heater, the way your own breath seems too loud. That night, I sat in the kitchen with a cooling cup of tea and the weight of 73 years pressing down on me. There was a time this table was noisy. Diane as a teenager, slamming her books down. Cassie as a child, coloring with her tongue poking out. George, my husband, reading the newspaper and muttering about politics. Now, there's just me, and the soft clink of a spoon against porcelain. The folder I pulled from the drawer was thick, too thick, labeled neatly in my handwriting, Family Expenses. Old-fashioned, maybe, but I liked paper. Paper told the truth. Inside were years of check stubs, receipts, notes written in Diane's fast cursive. Mom, can you cover Cassie's braces just this once? Promise I'll pay you back. Emergency fund needed. Rent situation, long story. We'll explain later. Could you co-sign the loan for my car? It's just until my credit improves. I flipped through the pages like a woman thumbing through evidence at her own trial. There was the invoice from the summer camp Cassie loved, nearly $3,000, paid in full by me. There were the bills from the private school, the emergency vet visit for that awful little dog Diane insisted was a therapy animal. Even Cassie's college meal plan. I covered a semester when Diane said she was between jobs. How many times had I said yes, thinking it was love, thinking it was duty? I looked around my small, clean kitchen. Everything in its place. Everything earned. George and I had worked for this house. I had balanced budgets at the office for 32 years. I had packed lunches, sewed hems, taken in work on the weekends. And now I paid for dinners where I was told to sit in the back. There was no anger that night, just something else, like when a splinter finally works its way out of your skin. Painful, but clean. I pulled out my notebook, the one I used for serious thinking. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Non-essential payments to family, to review." And then, line by line, I began listing them. $800 monthly transfer to Diane, labeled as support, $150 for Cassie's phone bill, $100 toward their streaming and cable subscriptions, auto payment for Diane's car insurance, $220 medical co-pay reimbursements, inconsistent but frequent credit card. I had added Cassie to, for emergencies only, balance, $2,141. I stared at that last one the longest. She used it for makeup, for designer shoes, for some sushi subscription I didn't even know existed. I'd asked her about it once. She said, "Oh, I thought you knew. Mom said it was okay?" Of course she did. I turned the page and began writing again. This time, just one sentence. They don't love you. They use you. It looked harsh in my handwriting. I didn't want to believe it. But the truth has a way of scratching its way to the surface. The teacup was empty by then. I stood, rinsed it carefully, and placed it in the rack to dry. Then I walked to the bedroom, opened the safe, and pulled out a folder labeled Legal. Inside, my will, a power of attorney. The documents I had prepared 5 years ago, naming Diane as my financial proxy in the event of incapacity. I stared at the signature line. Tomorrow, I would call the bank. Call my lawyer. Make it clear. I was not incapacitated. I was not confused. I was not old in the way they wished I was. I was still here, and I was done paying to be invisible. The next morning, I was up before the sun. Old habits. My body still believed it had work to do, that there was a desk to get to, accounts to balance, reports to file. But my calendar was empty now. No appointments, no errands. Just one task I'd written at the top of my notebook. Take it back. I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of tea and reread the numbers from the night before. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the bank. "Thank you for calling East Haven Mutual," said a cheerful voice. "This is Kelly. How can I help you today?" "My name is Agnes Hart," I said calmly. "I'd like to speak with a manager regarding my accounts. It's a sensitive matter." She hesitated, then switched her tone. "Of course, Mrs. Hart. One moment." A click, a brief silence, and then a man came on the line. "Mrs. Hart, this is Mr. Dalton, Senior Account Services. How can I assist you?" "I need to freeze 2 cards," I said. "One of them has a secondary user, Cassandra Hart. I want her removed and the balance transferred to me, immediately." There was a pause. "Yes, of course," he said carefully. "May I ask, is the secondary user a relative?" "She is. My granddaughter." "And I believe there's been misuse of the card." "I see. We can start with a review. If there are transactions you don't recognize—" "I recognize all of them," I cut in. "That's not the issue. The issue is consent. None of them were authorized by me directly. And going forward, I will not be paying for another designer purse or subscription box in her name. Cancel the card. Send me the balance. I'll handle it." He cleared his throat. "Understood, Mrs. Hart. I'll make a note and send the authorization forms to your email. Anything else?" "Yes," I said. "There's a monthly transfer of $800 to Diane Hart. Cancel it. Also a relative? My daughter." He was quiet. Maybe he was waiting for me to soften, to laugh and say, "Oh, never mind, it's family." But I didn't. "I'd also like to change the security contact and remove her name as backup. She's no longer to have access to my information. I'll process those changes for you. But please be aware, some of these modifications may require in-person verification. I'll come to the branch today." He hesitated. "Mrs. Hart, may I ask, has something happened? We've noticed a lot of generosity on your part over the years." I let out a breath. "Yes, that's exactly what happened. Too much generosity. Too little respect." "Understood," he said, and his voice was softer this time. "We'll have everything ready for your visit." After I hung up, I sat still for a while. The kitchen felt different. Not bigger, not brighter. Just mine again. By the time I arrived at the branch, the sky had cleared. A young teller greeted me at the door and led me to a private room. Mr. Dalton, a kind-looking man with graying temples, met me with a folder already prepared. We went over everything. 2 cards canceled, 1 balance consolidated, all monthly transfers halted, Diane's name removed from backup access, Cassie's from the authorized users list. At the bottom of the folder was my old power of attorney document. "This names your daughter as sole agent," Mr. Dalton said gently. "Would you like to update this?" I nodded. "Destroy it. I'll speak to my attorney about a replacement." "Do you have someone in mind?" I smiled. "Yes, myself." He chuckled. "I think that's an excellent choice." We shook hands. As I walked out of the bank, I felt it. Not pride exactly, not yet, but something better. Control. It was mine again. That afternoon, I sat on the porch with a sandwich and a glass of lemonade. Across the street, the neighbors' grandchildren played in the yard, laughing. I wondered how long it had been since I'd heard Cassie laugh like that around me. Not politely, not distractedly, but with real warmth. Years, maybe. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to do something about it. I still remembered the smell of police stations from the old days: ink, coffee, and dust. This one was newer, but it carried the same quiet weight, the same silence that pressed down on the edges of things. The officer at the front desk didn't look more than 30. He smiled politely, then blinked when I handed him a manila envelope. "I'd like to report a financial incident," I said. He glanced down at the envelope. "Of course. Is this regarding fraud on your account?" "Yes," I said evenly. "The fraud was committed by someone I know." I expected surprise, maybe discomfort, but instead he nodded, motioned to a small room behind the glass doors, and said, "Right this way, ma'am. Detective Harmon will assist you." Detective Harmon looked like someone who'd seen a bit too much in life. Lines around his mouth. Frown already forming as he greeted me, but when I sat down and opened my folder, he straightened slightly. "You're prepared," he said. "I was a bookkeeper for 30 years, I replied. "I document everything." Inside the folder were printed statements, highlighted transactions, emails showing transfers and responses from Diane, and screenshots of purchases made with the card I'd added Cassie to "for emergencies only." "There was no emergency," I said. "There never has been." He nodded slowly, flipping through each page. "And you're saying you never directly authorized these?" "I authorized the card," I said. "I did not authorize a $400 handbag, $92 monthly makeup boxes, nor a $600 dinner where I was told to sit in the back." That got a reaction. He looked up. Just for a second. Not pity, not humor, just recognition. "Has there been any attempt to confront them directly?" "Not yet," I said. "That's not my goal. I don't want a confrontation. I want documentation, a record. I want this to be on paper, that I said no." He leaned back, tapped a pen on the folder. "I understand. Legally, this falls into a gray area, because the card was shared and their family. But from what I see here, there's a potential pattern of coercion and financial manipulation." "That's all I want recorded," I said. "I don't expect jail time, but I expect acknowledgement." "And what would you like to do with this report?" "I want it filed, in my name. And I want her name, Cassandra Hart, included as a person of interest." He wrote something down. "It won't trigger an investigation without further action," he said carefully. "I know," I said. "But next time someone tells me I'm being dramatic, I'll have paperwork to prove otherwise." He nodded, gathered the pages, and slid a copy across to me. I left the station quietly. No dramatics, no speeches. Just a woman walking into the sunlight with a copy of her own boundaries. Printed, signed, official. At home, I placed the folder inside my safe. Not because I was afraid, but because it mattered. That evening, Diane called. First time in weeks. "Hi, Mom," she said lightly. "I was wondering if the bank called you. There's been a weird freeze on Cassie's card. And some issue with the transfer. I didn't want you to worry." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "No need to worry," I said. "I took care of it." "Oh?" Her voice shifted. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said slowly, "I canceled the card, and the transfer, and your access to my accounts. That phase of our relationship is over." There was silence. Then, "Mom, are you okay?" "I've never been more clear," I said. "You and Cassie can manage. You always said you could." Her voice grew sharper. "Why now? Is this about that dinner? You're being—" I hung up, not out of cruelty, but because I was done explaining myself to people who never listened. The silence afterward felt earned. The next morning, I walked into Hart and Lowen Legal with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. The receptionist recognized me from years ago, back when George and I updated our will. She smiled, polite but distracted, until I said, "I need to speak to Mr. Lowen about modifying my estate." That got her attention. 15 minutes later, I was seated in the same chair I'd sat in with George, back when we were still a we. The room hadn't changed. Neither had Lowen. Still trim, still too smooth for his age, but competent. I trusted him. "Mrs. Hart," he said, folding his hands, "to what do I owe the visit?" "I want to amend my will, remove 2 beneficiaries." He blinked. "Diane and Cassandra?" I nodded. "Effective immediately, and I'd like to establish a trust, with strict access control. Not 1 penny is to be touched by either of them." He tilted his head. "Would you like to talk about why?" "No," I said. "I'd like to talk about how." He got to work. For the next hour, we reviewed documents, crossed out names, drafted new language. I named the local community college's adult education program as 1 beneficiary. I named a neighbor who'd checked in on me during winter as another. I set aside funds for the upkeep of the veterans' garden George used to volunteer in. And for the final portion, I created a trust for a future granddaughter not yet corrupted by entitlement. Lowen raised an eyebrow at that. I didn't explain. By the end, I was tired. But it was the good kind of tired. The kind that comes from building something, not surviving something. Lowen walked me to the door. "You know," he said gently, "most people your age don't do this." I met his eyes. "Most people my age think they're too old to change anything." "And you don't?" I smiled. "I'm 73, not gone." He chuckled and held the door for me. "Fair enough, Mrs. Hart." Back at home, I made a sandwich, fed the birds, and sat by the window. The phone rang. I didn't answer. Another call, then a text. From Cassie. "Grandma, did you really cancel my card? This is insane. I can't even Uber home." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, "There's a bus. You're young. You'll be fine." I didn't send it. I deleted the message. Turned the phone off. I wasn't interested in teaching lessons anymore. I was building walls. Quiet, necessary walls. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what would be left on the other side. It was early evening when the second call came, this time from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring, then again, and again. On the 4th try, curiosity got the better of me. "Mrs. Hart?" The voice was brisk, male. "This is Jonathan Leeds from East Haven Mutual's Fraud Prevention Unit. I believe you submitted a report yesterday?" "Yes," I said, setting down my tea. "I did." "We've reviewed the documents you provided, and I'd like to walk you through our findings. Do you have a moment?" "I do," I said, reaching for my notebook. "We've identified 17 transactions tied to a card under your name with secondary access granted to Ms. Cassandra Hart. These include purchases from high-end retailers, a luxury subscription service, and several entertainment expenses exceeding the usual profile on your account." I already knew this, but hearing it laid out like evidence, clean, clinical, hit differently. "In addition," he continued, "we found 2 instances of wire transfers initiated from your account without verified 2-factor approval. They appear to have been authorized via saved credentials, potentially from a device tied to your daughter, Diane Hart." I didn't speak for a moment. "Mrs. Hart, are you aware of these transfers?" "No." I said calmly. I didn't authorize them, but I suspected something like this was happening. He took a breath. In that case, we're legally required to escalate this for potential investigation. However, because the parties involved are family, many clients prefer to resolve this privately. Not this client, I said. Make it official. Escalate. Understood, he said quietly. We'll open a formal inquiry. You may be asked for further statements. Is that acceptable? Yes, I said. I want this on the record. After we hung up, I sat in the silence again. A different kind this time. Not empty, not aching, just still. My phone buzzed again. Cassie, this time in all caps. What did you tell the bank? They're saying I'm under investigation? A second message followed. This is crazy. Why would you do this to family? I typed one line. Because family shouldn't steal. Again, I didn't send it. Some things don't need responses. Some truths, once set in motion, don't need defense. Later that night, Diane called. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text came through. Mom, we need to talk. You've made a big mistake. Please call me. I didn't call. Instead, I opened my notebook and crossed out a word I'd written weeks ago. Obligation. And beneath it, I wrote a new one. Closure. The next morning, they came in person. I knew they would. It was only a matter of time. I heard the car door slam before I saw them. Diane's SUV, pulling into my driveway like it still had the right to. Cassie got out first. Fast, angry, not a trace of the girl I once cradled in my arms. Diane followed, her walk slower, deliberate. Both wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. I didn't move from the kitchen window. Let them knock. And they did. Hard. Twice. Then again. I opened the door not wide. Mom, Diane said, breath tight. Can we come in? I looked at them both. Why? Don't do this, she said quickly. We're not doing this at the door. I stepped back. Let them in. They walked past me like they still lived here. Cassie went straight to the living room, plopped onto the couch like it was a courtroom where she was both the defendant and the victim. Diane hovered near the dining table, glancing at the photographs. George in uniform, me holding baby Diane, Cassie at 5 with cake on her nose. Her mouth tightened. I'll make tea, I said, because I still had manners. No, we're not here for tea, Diane snapped, then caught herself. Please. Just sit. I sat across from them. Not beside. Not between. Cassie spoke first. You called the bank. You said I committed fraud. I didn't say it, I said. I filed a report. They're the ones who used that word. Diane raised her hand. Mom, be reasonable. Cassie's young. She didn't understand how the card worked. She understood how to buy handbags with it, I replied. And sushi. And concert tickets. She understood that part just fine. She thought it was covered, Diane said, voice brittle. You've always helped us. You never said no. I'm saying it now. They looked at each other, then back at me. This investigation, it could affect her future, Diane said. Do you want that on your conscience? No, I said quietly. I want the past 10 years on yours. Cassie rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. So what, you're mad about dinner? Because I told you to sit in the back? I looked at her, really looked, and said, No, Cassie, I'm not mad about the chair. I'm mad about the years I spent giving, time, money, love, and getting indifference in return. She opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. I gave you every opportunity, every kindness. I paid for your school, your phone, your clothes. I paid for your future. And the moment I expected basic respect, You showed me what I meant to you." Diane broke in. "So what? You're cutting us off? Over a few miscommunications?" I leaned forward. "No, I'm not cutting you off. I'm finally cutting the rope I've been dragging you both with for too long." They sat in stunned silence. "You're angry now," I continued. "You'll talk. Maybe you'll cry. Maybe you'll threaten. But eventually, you'll leave, and I'll still be here. With my house, my accounts, my name, my peace." Cassie stood abruptly. "I can't believe you're doing this." "You didn't believe I'd ever stop," I said. "That's why it worked for so long." She stormed out. Diane lingered a moment longer. Her voice was lower now, almost broken. "You're choosing pride over family." "No," I said. "I'm choosing dignity over manipulation." She left. The door closed behind her with a softness that hurt more than a slam. I stood alone in my quiet house again. Not victorious, not angry, just settled. I made myself that cup of tea, after all. And for the first time in years, I drank it while feeling like I didn't owe anyone anything. The day after the visit, I received an email from the bank. Subject: Account status, investigation update. Body: Mrs. Hart, per your request and recent findings, the accounts have been adjusted accordingly. The card issued to Cassandra Hart has been permanently closed, and the fraudulent activity flagged. The matter has been escalated to our legal department. Please find attached a formal summary for your records. I printed the PDF, 3 neat pages of legal clarity. I placed it in a fresh folder marked Cassandra Closed. I didn't feel triumphant, only clean. But word travels fast in small towns, especially among people who used to benefit from your silence. That evening, I received a call from the office of Cassie's employer, a young woman named Teresa. "Mrs. Hart, I hope you don't mind us reaching out," she said gently. "We're conducting a standard employment review, and as part of our internal ethics check, we were notified of an open investigation involving your granddaughter. Could you confirm whether the report was filed by you?" I paused. "I can," I said. "I filed it myself." There was no sound for a moment. Then Teresa replied, carefully, "I understand. Thank you. We'll treat that information confidentially." I didn't ask what they'd do with it. I didn't have to. Later that night, I received another text from Cassie. No all caps this time. "You just ruined my job. Why would you do this to me?" I read it once, then again. Then I typed back, "You did this to yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences." This time, I pressed send. No reply came. The next morning, my neighbor Linda came over with a tin of cookies. She hadn't heard everything, but she'd heard enough. "Agnes," she said, setting the tin down, "I hope you don't mind me saying, but it's about time." "About time? You've been too kind for too long," she said. "Everyone knew it. We all saw how they used you." I poured tea. "And no one said anything." Linda shrugged. "It's not easy, watching someone you care about be stepped on. It's harder being the one on the ground." She nodded. "But you're not anymore," she said. "You're upright, straight-backed." I didn't realize until that moment how much I needed to hear that. We drank tea and ate her dry cookies, talked about garden plans and winter coats. Not about Cassie, not about Diane. They weren't the center of my world anymore. That afternoon, I went through the house collecting pieces. Picture frames, old letters, mementos of times I now saw with clearer eyes. I didn't throw them away. I just moved them. Out of sight. Into a drawer. Not erased, but no longer in the center. That night, for the first time in years, I slept with the bedroom window cracked open. The cold air brushed my face, and I dreamed not of arguments or guilt or holidays spent waiting by the phone, but of silence, of light, of peace, of... The following week, I called my lawyer again. "Lowen," I said, as soon as he picked up, "I'm ready to finalize everything." He knew what I meant. We'd been drafting, editing, preparing, but now the choice was made. "I'll have the full trust and updated will waiting," he said. "You want me to remove them entirely?" "Yes. Diane and Cassandra. Remove them both. No inheritance, no executor rights, nothing." There was a pause. "You know this can't be undone quietly." "I'm not quiet anymore," I said, "and I'm not changing my mind." 2 days later, I sat in his office again, signing page after page. The pen moved steadily. My hands didn't shake. Lowen glanced at me once, halfway through. "You're sure?" "Absolutely," he nodded. "It's rare," he said, "to see someone this firm in their 70s. I looked up at him. "Maybe we're only firm after 70. Before that, we're still trying to be liked." After I signed the last page, Lowen leaned back. "Agnes, you've protected your estate. You've created a trust with provisions for education, charity, and one trusted neighbor as a secondary agent. You've locked it down airtight. And frankly," he smiled, "it's one of the clearest, cleanest documents I've ever seen." "Good," I said, standing. "I built my life in balance sheets. I might as well leave it that way." He walked me to the door. "Do you want to leave a letter for them?" he asked. "Something to explain?" I thought about it, then shook my head. "No. I've already spent years explaining myself. They weren't listening." That night, the doorbell rang. Not Diane, not Cassie. It was Margie, the girl who delivers groceries on Thursdays. She was early, but polite. She handed me the bag, then hesitated. "I hope it's not rude, Mrs. Hart, but is it true what people are saying? About your family? About the bank stuff?" I tilted my head. "What are they saying?" She shifted her weight. "That you turned them in. That you cut them off." I nodded. "That's true." She blinked. "I think that's the coolest thing I've ever heard." I laughed, short and surprised. She went on. "My grandma used to be the same, always giving, and they just took and took. I used to wish she'd say something, but she never did. She was probably afraid to lose what little she had left." Margie nodded. "Yeah. But she lost it anyway." After she left, I sat by the window again. I thought about the women like me, in houses like mine, sitting with empty cups and full bank statements, wondering where the gratitude went. And I made a decision. I opened my laptop, clicked New Document, and typed at the top, "A guide to saying no, for women who've given too much. Because there are others like me, and they shouldn't have to wait until 73 to take their name back. There are things you carry for so long, you forget they're heavy. Memories, mostly. Some soft, some not." That Sunday, I opened the box I hadn't touched in over a decade. It lived on the highest shelf in the hallway closet, behind a rolled-up quilt and a broken lamp I never threw out. Inside, George's letters, the ones he wrote before we married, when he was stationed overseas. They smelled faintly of dust and cedar. I unfolded one and read it slowly, aloud. "Aggie, when I get home, we'll start small. A house, a dog maybe. Nothing fancy. But you'll keep the books, and I'll keep the yard, and we'll make it work. I don't care how tight money is. We'll never be poor if we have decency." I read that line 3 times. We kept that promise for years. Even when the money got tight. Even when Diane needed braces and we couldn't afford the heater repair, and George patched the roof himself in the rain. We never got rich. But we weren't poor. Not in that way. After he died, I tried to keep that same balance. But somehow, over the years, it slipped. I gave too much and received too little. It wasn't just the money. It was the way Diane would speak to me like I was furniture with a bank account. The way Cassie rolled her eyes when I asked her to put her phone down at the table. The way I started apologizing every time I showed up in my own life. I folded the letter gently and placed it back in the box. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I pulled out the photo albums, not the ones with holidays and birthdays. Those were always posed, too perfect. I looked for the photos where people didn't know the camera was on. George, mid-laugh, with grease on his hands from fixing the car. Diane, 10 years old, building a snow fort with a hole in her mitten. Cassie, as a toddler, asleep on my chest, her little hand curled under my chin. There had been love, real love, before it turned into expectation. I stared at those pictures a long time, then put them back, one by one. Not out of bitterness, but to remind myself I wasn't wrong to give. I was just wrong to keep giving when it stopped being appreciated. The phone rang around 5 p.m. It was the community college. A woman named Joanna from the adult education office. "Mrs. Hart," she said. "We received your message about the planned donation. I just wanted to say, your contribution will fully fund 10 scholarships. 10 women, most of them over 40. Some single mothers. Some retraining after layoffs." I nodded, tears pressing behind my eyes. "Thank you," I said. "That's exactly where I wanted it to go." After we hung up, I sat at the table and looked around my home. Not the house, the home. It was quiet, but not lonely. George would have smiled at what I did. He wouldn't have liked the drama, maybe, but he'd have understood the principle. We'll never be poor if we have decency. I whispered the words again, like a benediction, like a vow. And I meant it. The first apology came on a Wednesday afternoon, and it wasn't even hers. It was Diane. A text at first, then a voicemail. "Mom, I think we need to talk. I know things got out of hand. I know we made mistakes. Cassie, she's having a rough time. She lost her job. I just think maybe we could meet for coffee?" I listened to the message 3 times. She didn't say she was sorry. Not quite. She said things got out of hand, that mistakes were made. Passive voice, no ownership. But she asked to meet. I waited a day before I responded. "I'm not ready for coffee, but I'm listening." The next morning, she showed up unannounced. Again. But this time, she didn't storm in. She stood at the edge of the porch and waited. "Can I come up?" she asked. "You already are." She sat on the bench. I stayed in my chair. She looked tired. The kind of tired that came from being caught, not from guilt. She fidgeted with her ring, the wedding band I'd helped her buy when she and Martin got married. Another quiet gift she never thanked me for. "Cassie's devastated," she started. "She says she didn't mean to hurt you, that it was just a misunderstanding. She thought you were okay with everything." "She never asked," I said. "She's 24, Diane said. They're all like this." "No," I said. "Not all. Just the ones who are raised to believe they'll never face consequences." She blinked, looked away. "I made mistakes," she said finally. "I didn't protect that line between help and harm. I let her think. Everything was fine as long as it came from you." I said nothing. "I'm sorry," she added, quieter. "For what?" "For not stopping it. for not standing up when I should have, for letting her treat you like a wallet with a face. That one cut, but at least it was honest. Why now? I asked. She looked up. Because I realized I'm about to lose the only person who ever actually stood by me. I sipped my tea, let the silence stretch. I'm not promising anything, I said. Forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned, over time, through actions. I understand, she said, and for the first time in a long time, I believed she did. Before she left, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small, square envelope. It's from Cassie, she said. A letter. She didn't want a text. I took it, but didn't open it. After she drove away, I sat on the porch and watched the sky change colors. Autumn always knew how to leave, with brilliance, not silence. When I finally opened the letter, the handwriting surprised me. Not rushed, not messy, just small and careful. Dear Grandma, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I'm sorry. For dinner, for the card, for not seeing you for who you are. I thought I was entitled to your love. I forgot it was a gift. You don't owe me anything, but I wanted to say thank you anyway, for everything you ever gave, and even for what you've taken back. Maybe that's the greatest gift of all. Cassie. I folded the letter, placed it inside the back of my notebook. I didn't cry, but I closed my eyes for a long time. I didn't reply to Cassie's letter right away. Some things need to sit a while, like dough, like anger. But the next ripple came from outside my house, and outside my family. It started with a phone call from a reporter. Mrs. Hart? My name is Celia Martin. I'm a local journalist working on a piece about elder financial abuse and the increasing number of fraud reports involving family members. Your name came up in court filings. My breath caught for a second, but I steadied it. I'm not interested in being interviewed. I understand, she said. But off the record, what you did, it matters. Do you know how rare it is for someone in your position to stand up and document it? I didn't do it to be rare, I said. I did it because I was tired. She was quiet for a beat, then asked, would you at least consider sharing your story anonymously? No names, no locations? Just the facts. So other women know they're not alone? I didn't answer. Not then. But after we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the window. The birds were pecking at the feeder. The mail truck passed by. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. I remembered all the women I'd known over the years. Neighbors, church friends. Women who smiled too politely when their grown children spoke over them. Who paid quietly for things they never dared question. I remembered Linda next door, who once whispered, I just don't want to be alone, when her son borrowed her savings and never paid her back. I remembered my own mother, who left me a house but nothing else, because she spent every dime trying to make her ungrateful youngest believe she was a good mother. I opened the folder I'd labeled Guide to Saying No and began writing again. Not legal documents, not logs of money spent, just stories, not mine alone, but versions I'd seen again and again. A woman pays for her daughter's rent for 4 years, only to be told she's emotionally manipulative when she asks for a visit. A grandmother co-signs a loan she doesn't understand and loses her credit when her grandson defaults. A widow pays for a wedding she's not even invited to. I typed until my fingers cramped. Later that week, I emailed Celia. Subject: yes. Body: I'll tell the story. But not just mine. I want others to be heard too, even the quiet ones. especially the quiet ones. You can call it what you like. I call it taking my name back. Her reply was quick. Thank you. This will help more people than you know. The story ran under the headline, When Love Becomes Leverage, the Hidden Toll of Family Financial Abuse. There was no photo of me, no quotes, but I read the article 3 times, and when I saw the final line, I knew my voice had made it through. Sometimes, the strongest thing a woman can say, after decades of giving, is simply, no more. The fallout came quietly, as most real consequences do. No slamming doors, no courtroom spectacle, just a letter in the mail, thin and official. To Ms. Agnes Hart, from East Haven. Mutual Legal Division subject, Resolution of Internal Fraud Review. We confirm that the account in question has been closed and associated unauthorized transactions have been documented. Further, per your cooperation and provision of supporting materials, the individual named as Cassandra Hart has been removed from eligibility for any future co-applications within East Haven Mutual or its affiliate institutions. This notice is for your records. No further action is required unless pursued through external legal channels. I folded the letter, placed it in the final folder I'd made for all this. Labeled simply, done. A few days later, the inevitable happened. Cassie's name was quietly removed from the consulting firm's website. Her LinkedIn changed, seeking new opportunities. No public scandal, just erasure, like most consequences for pretty girls with rich parents. But it was a mark, and she'd feel it. Sooner or later. She didn't contact me again, and I didn't expect her to. But Diane did. Another letter. This one handwritten. Mom, I won't pretend I agree with everything you've done. I still think you were too harsh. But I see you now. I see how tired you were. I see what I didn't before. All the times you said yes when no one else would. And I'm sorry I made you think that was just your job as a mother. I'm not asking to be added back into the will. I'm not asking for the money. I just want to find a new way to be your daughter if you'll let me. I read that one slowly, then again, then put it in the same folder as the bank letter, not because it was done, but because it was documented. That week, the article from Celia started spreading. Women began emailing her, writing in. Some even found me, through whispers or luck or shared spaces. I started getting letters in my mailbox from women I didn't know. One, from a woman in Arizona, read, I left my son off the deed last week. For the first time in 20 years, I slept without fear. Another said, I canceled my daughter's second line on my phone bill. She called me names I won't repeat, but I didn't cry. I felt clean. And one, short and folded in thirds, simply read, You gave me permission. I kept them all, not out of pride, but out of duty. Because I had once needed that permission too. Because I had waited too long for someone to say, You're allowed to stop. Now I said it for others, and I said it for myself. I never thought peace would look like this. Not a grand gesture, not applause. Just days. Days that begin with early light and toast. With silence that feels chosen, not forced. With a kind of quiet dignity that comes from knowing the door is locked, not to keep others out, but to keep yourself in. One morning, I walked to the post office. Not for letters, just for movement. For proof that I still had a place in the rhythm of things. The clerk, a woman younger than Diane but older than Cassie, recognized me from the article. You're the woman, she said softly. The one who said no. I nodded. I think about you when I talk to my mother, she added. I think about not becoming the kind of daughter who waits until it's too late. I smiled, gently. Then don't. She handed me a package. I hadn't ordered anything. Back home, I opened it. Inside, a small frame. In it, a printed quote from the article, mounted carefully. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to keep what's yours. Even your name. No note. No return address. Just that. I placed it on my hallway table. Let it live by the door. The last thing I saw when I left and the first thing I saw when I came home. That evening, I sat by the window and watched Linda work in her yard. She looked up and waved. We weren't close. Not in the daily kind of way, but she had seen my lights on when no one else noticed. She had knocked when Diane hadn't. That counted. I wrote her a small card that night. Nothing long. Just, for all the times you saw me when others didn't. Thank you. I slipped it into her mailbox the next morning. No response came. She didn't need to reply. Sometimes acknowledgement is its own language. That Sunday, I visited George's grave. I hadn't gone in months, not out of avoidance, just necessity. There had been too much to survive first. I brought fresh flowers, the yellow ones he liked, stood by the stone, traced the letters of his name. I did it, I said aloud. I didn't let them take me with them. The wind moved through the grass. I wish you'd seen it, I whispered. But maybe you always did. I stayed until the light changed, until the quiet felt complete. Then I walked home. Slowly, proudly. And I slept that night without locking my jaw or bracing my heart, because the storm had passed, and I was still standing. There is a freedom in being forgotten. It sounds bleak, but it isn't. When they stop calling, stop asking, stop assuming, what's left is you, just you, and your breath, and your days, and your choices. No more playing roles. No more giving because it's expected. No more showing up to be sat in the back. Now I sit where I want. The library, the cafe on 5th Street, the front pew at church. I speak when I have something to say, and I say no without apologizing. It's been 6 months since I filed the report, since I locked the accounts, since I closed the door on that version of motherhood that asks you to disappear. Diane writes occasionally, not to ask for money, just words. Sometimes I answer. Sometimes I don't. We're building something quieter now, slower. I don't know what it is yet, but it's honest, and that's new. Cassie hasn't written again. I hope she's learning, but that's her story to write. Mine is already changing shape. I've started teaching, a workshop once a month at the Adult Education Center. It's called Financial Boundaries Protecting Your Name. 20 women came the first time, 50 the next. They come with folders, with questions. With guilt so thick you can see it in their posture. I tell them what no one told me. You're not selfish. You're not cruel. You're not broken for wanting to be respected. You are not a bank. You are not a babysitter unless you want to be. You are not responsible for fixing the holes in everyone else's boat while yours sinks. And when they cry, and they always do, I let them. Because sometimes the first no sounds a lot like grief. I'm still learning that too. Some mornings, I miss the noise, the version of life where I was needed, where the phone rang and the calendar filled and the house was loud. But then I open the curtains. I hear the birds. I stretch my arms without aching. And I remember, being needed isn't the same as being loved. Now I am both. But first, by myself. If you're reading this, maybe quietly, maybe late at night, maybe wondering if it's too late to draw your line. I'll tell you what I tell them at the end of every class. It's not too late. You're not too old. And nothing given in love requires your silence in return. If this story touched something in you, share it. Send it to the woman who always pays, the grandmother who sits in the corner, the mother who's told she's dramatic. Let them know they are not alone. And if you see yourself in my words, tell me. Leave a comment. I'll be reading.